morning, YouTube. Squirrel here. Another beautiful, if cold, February morning in Northern California. My bike flashed a warning at me that ice was possible this morning because it's reading the outside temperature below 32. It's a little nipply. But gorgeous day, not a cloud in the sky, sun shining. It's supposed to warm up into the 70s later. Really hard to complain. So today, as promised, I wanted to talk about the process I went through selecting a new motorcycle. So I've owned 3 motorcycles in my life. The first one I owned was a 1985 BMW K100 RT, a quote-unquote sport touring bike. It was a reliable bike until it wasn't. Once things started going downhill, it was just done. It wasn't running worth a damn. Constantly having to replace parts, and they were all 1-year parts that were nearly 30 years old. And the bike, it ran when it ran good, it ran strong, and it handled well. I put like 30,000 miles on that bike, so it was a good bike, but it had to go. I replaced it with my 2007 Harley-Davidson Street Rod. I bought that bike sight unseen from a dealer in Illinois. I just knew it was a bike I wanted, and that was a great bike, especially for being a Harley. The V-Rods were liquid cooled overhead cam motors, tons of power, big useful rev range, really a great bike. And that one was set up for handling. It had tall suspension. The negative was that it had me hunched over quite a bit behind the bars, and that started to get really fatiguing on my wrists and my shoulders. Well, I'd still have that bike, except I crashed it and broke my shoulder. That left me about 3 months to figure out what it was I wanted to replace the Harley with. I was pretty sure it wasn't going to be another Harley, and it certainly wasn't going to be Harley just to have a Harley. I'm not that kind of rider. So I started, willy-nilly looking at different bikes, sport bikes, naked bikes, touring bikes, just ran the gamut, looking at different things. Then I decided it was time to get a little more serious. So I sat down and I made a list of the things that for me I had to have or that I wanted to have in my next bike. Top of that list, comfort. I needed something with an upright seating position that I could comfortably ride thousands of miles if I needed to. So that eliminated right there more than half the bikes on the market. All the sport bikes, most of the naked bikes. Part of that comfort had to have a good seat, had to have a good seating position, had to have wind protection of some kind, or available aftermarket wind protection at least. Next thing I wanted a reasonably lightweight bike. I wanted, something that handled well, didn't weigh a lot, and preferably that was skinny enough to lane split on a regular basis. Because I do a lot of that, as you've seen. I didn't even factor price into it, but, price was definitely an issue, of course. So that was always in the back of my head. There's lots of great bikes for 30 grand, Not as many great bikes for 15 grand. Anyway, so I was looking for comfort, looking for something that handled well, didn't weigh too much. And let's be fair, I wanted some power. Now, how much some power was, wasn't really specified, but I knew it had to be at least as fast as a V-Rod was, which really isn't that tall in order. So I made a short list of bikes that fit all of that, and they pretty much all ended up being adventure bikes. There was, of course, the BMW R1200 GS, and there was the Ducati Multistrada, Triumph Tiger, there was another one in there. There was another one that was, it was an outlier. It wasn't one I was real interested in. I don't even remember what it was. It might have been the Super Tenere or something. So that only gave me 3 or 4 bikes to look at, and I had plenty of time. So I started expanding the list, saying, well, what bikes have most of the things I'm looking for? So I started looking at, you know, I knew the most important thing for me was that it was comfortable, was that I could do lots of miles on it. So then I started looking at American baggers, Victory Cross Country, Harley Street Glide, Indian, the one with the fairing on it. I'm drawing a blank right now. But anyway, the Indian with the fairing on it. So I went and looked at those bikes again. So they met the comfort, they met the adequate power. They failed horribly on weight and on price, except the Victory. The Victory, I was able to find a couple that would have worked on price, and they were much better on handling than the Harley or the Indian. Indian Chieftain, that's the model I'm trying to think of. So I looked at those, and then I started adding more bikes in, based mostly on low price. So I had things like the Yamaha FZ09 and FJ09, both great bikes. For the money, they're outstanding bikes. So I went and looked at those. Kawasaki Versys, the V-Strom from Suzuki. Went and looked at all of those. But every time I got on one or rode one, I could feel the things that were cheap. You know, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. Just, I could tell the things where they had cut corners to keep the price where it was. And those weren't really, on all those bikes, they just weren't things I was willing to accept. I was willing to pay more for a better made bike, for a less compromised bike. So I went out riding. I checked out all the big American bikes one day. Checked out all the big adventure bikes one day. Checked out the smaller stuff one day. Pretty much every day that I went out looking at bikes, I ended up at the same shop, and I'll go and throw them a plug. A place called the Motor Cafe in Sunnyvale, California. They had this beautiful orange KTM 1190 Adventure sitting on the floor. And I'd throw a leg over it, and it felt good. And I took my girlfriend with me to most of the bike shopping days. And just seeing me sit on the KTM, she instantly saw a difference. She saw that it fit me a lot better, fit my personality better, it made me smile more. I didn't even get to ride a KTM. I couldn't find anywhere that had a demo model. And I looked at the Multistrada, and it was, very, very similar to the KTM. I looked at the BMW, and it was very, very similar to the KTM. However, they were both $4,000 or $5,000 more expensive than the KTM, and neither of them did anything that the KTM didn't do. I didn't get on any of them and get a big grin. There was nothing about either of them to put it ahead of the KTM in my book. And yet they wanted a $4,000 or $5,000 premium for them. Well, that made it a pretty easy decision, or so I thought. Then I found this used Victory at a smoking deal. A $24,000 bike with 400 miles on it, on sale for $17K. It was hard not to go look at that one, so I did. Went and checked it out. Sat on it. Tooled it around. Just pulling it off the side stand, I knew it was wrong for me. The thing was so heavy. Just a massive, massive bike. I knew that wasn't going to work. It was a great deal, so I told a couple of my club members about it, but that one got snapped up pretty fast. That was the other thing. I didn't want to feel rushed because it was such a great deal either. I wanted to know I'd made the right decision. And I definitely feel that I have with my KTM 1190 Adventure. Such a good bike. Very flickable, very fast. I've just been very, very happy with it. Now, some might say I would have been happy with anything as long as I was back riding. And, you know, there is some truth to that. But I got to live with this bike for several more years, and I think I made absolutely the right choice. So that was the process I went through, trying to decide what to buy. You know, just to recap, started with a list of the things I wanted and needed on the bike. And then found the bikes that fit that. And then I expanded that list a little bit by compromising on some of the things I wanted. Turned out I didn't want to compromise. So I ended up right back where I started. Alright guys, I'm in the middle of this lane splitting hell here on 17, so I'm going to go ahead and log off. You guys have a great day out there. Keep the rubber down. Squirrel out.